Human waited by an alien girl's broken signal. Her explanation later became his new calm. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm had been clawing at the comms outpost for hours, its static crackling across the metal walls like invisible fingers. Inside, Ethan Cole sat alone beside the flickering console, his eyes fixed on the single broken signal that pulsed in a shaky rhythm. 7.14, pause, static, a soft voice cut mid-sentence. He didn't even know her name then, just the sound of her breath before the transmission died. A faint tone, thin as a thread, blinked on the monitor again. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the cold desk, listening the way someone listens for footsteps in an empty house. Lightning rolled across the desert flats outside, turning the windows into white sheets for a heartbeat before darkness swallowed everything again. The outpost heater hummed unevenly, struggling against the chill that crawled under the door. Ethan rubbed his thumb across the rim of his mug, now cold. He should have slept. Should have filed the interruption report. Should have let the signal expire like everyone said. Not our jurisdiction, his supervisor had reminded him. If the sender didn't reconnect, it wasn't meant for us. But the tone kept returning, broken but persistent. Like someone calling through a cracked window. Like someone who hadn't given up yet. Ethan adjusted the gain knob gently, almost tenderly, trying not to worsen the distortion. Somewhere in the scrambled static, he thought he heard that voice again, soft, strained, undeniably alive. A whisper carried on the crackle, not a word, just a sound close to breathing in. He felt it tighten something in his chest. "I'm here," he murmured, even though she couldn't hear him. Beyond the reinforced glass, the sand shimmered under the electric sky. Every flash revealed the same emptiness stretching for miles, but he kept looking anyway, as if she might appear at the edge of the storm itself. Hours slipped by, measured only by the blinking red diode and the slow ticking of the clock above his station. Midnight, then 1, then 2. Still he waited. Still the signal tried. It was the trying that held him there. The fragile attempt of someone reaching out through interference thick enough to swallow whole starships. Around 2:17 a.m., the signal hiccuped, brightened, then cut clean. The console beeped once, a final digital sigh, and the room fell into a hush so complete it felt like the outpost had stopped breathing. Ethan sat back, exhaling slowly, steadying himself. Broken signals didn't fix themselves. Whatever happened out there, whoever she was alone now. And yet the silence didn't push him away. It pulled him in. Outside, the storm shifted. A shape, small, unsteady, moved through the lightning haze, footsteps dragging across the sand. Ethan froze. His breath caught. Because for the first time, the signal wasn't on the monitor. It was walking toward him. The shape moved with the unsure rhythm of someone fighting exhaustion rather than distance. Ethan pressed a hand to the cold glass, feeling the low hum of the storm vibrating through the frame. For a moment, he wondered if his tired mind was inventing her, but the outline held steady, lit in brief silver flashes every time lightning skimmed the horizon. He grabbed his jacket and keyed open the airlock, bracing as the wind pushed against the door with a soft, insistent pressure. Warm dust stung his face, and the air tasted metallic from the ion buildup. A few feet from the threshold, she stood swaying, her hands slightly lifted as if trying to find balance in gravity she was not used to. Blue light slid across her skin each time the sky cracked open, revealing soft metallic hues that looked almost translucent in the storm glare. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, locked on him with a startled stillness, like she had expected no one to be waiting. "You heard me," she whispered, though her voice barely carried over the wind. Ethan stepped closer, careful, slow, palms open. He could see the details now, the way her breathing hitched with effort and the trembling of her shoulders under the thin fabric of her travel suit. "Your signal reached the outpost," he said. "I stayed on channel 7.14. The way she exhaled at that, sharp and relieved, told him more than any explanation. He offered his arm. For a second she hesitated, studying his face like she was checking for something dangerous, something hidden, but whatever she looked for she did not find. Her fingers, cool and faintly luminescent, curled lightly onto his sleeve. The moment their steps synced, her weight sagged as though she had been holding herself upright through sheer determination. Inside the airlock, the storm noise softened to a gentle static. She steadied herself against the wall, looking around with cautious curiosity. Her voice was softer when she spoke again. I did not think anyone would still be listening. It has been many hours. Ethan powered the seal shut and adjusted the lights down by instinct, not wanting the brightness to overwhelm her. Signals matter, he said, even the broken ones. Her gaze lifted to him at that, something fragile and bright moving behind her expression. The emergency heater clicked on with a low thump, sending a warm draft across the small entry space. She closed her eyes briefly as if savoring it, then opened them with a steadier focus. Up close, she looked younger than he had imagined from the voice on the transmission, but there was an old kind of caution in the way she kept her hands close to her body, as though unsure what space she was allowed to occupy. My name is Leary, she said quietly. I meant to send coordinates, but the transmitter failed. I thought the storm would bury the rest. Ethan guided her gently into the main room, past the humming consoles and flickering monitors. I am Ethan, he said, and you made it through. Leary's eyes traveled toward the desk where the red diode still blinked its faint, steady rhythm. She touched her fingers lightly to the edge of the console, as if the pattern of the light meant something private to her. You waited, she murmured. All this time. Ethan did not answer right away. The storm outside whispered along the metal walls, and for a moment silence carried more truth than any explanation could. Finally, he said, I thought someone out there might need someone in here. Leary's shoulders eased, her breath balancing into something calmer, and for the first time she stood without trembling. The words lingered between them, soft enough that Ethan almost wondered if the storm outside had whispered them instead. Leary held the cup close, letting the gentle heat settle into her hands as though she was relearning what warmth felt like. The air in the outpost carried a quiet calm now, the kind that arrives only after long uncertainty begins to ease. Ethan adjusted one of the panel settings to stabilize the temperature, then moved toward the small supply locker. Your transmitter, he said, opening a drawer carefully. Let me take a look at it. If it is reparable, I can try. Leary reached into a compartment at her belt pouch and placed a small device in his hand. Up close, its surface carried a subtle glow, the texture almost like cooled glass shaped by heat. The inner wiring flickered faintly, misfiring with an irregular pulse. Ethan studied it while she watched him with an expression hovering between hope and resignation. You have seen technology like this before? She asked gently. Not exactly, he answered, setting the delicate piece onto his workstation. But signals behave the same way no matter who builds them. They want to be found. Her eyes softened, and she took a slow breath, almost trembling on the release. Ethan worked with quiet focus, pulling up a diagnostic display, adjusting the calibration on the tool in his hand. Leary remained close, but not too close, as if she worried that her presence might disturb the process. The storm outside faded into a distant rumble, like the world beyond the outpost was finally settling down. Every few minutes, Ethan glanced toward her, noting how her posture eased each time the transmitter flickered with a steadier pulse. This component is struggling, he explained, pointing to a small crystalline node. It is trying to maintain alignment, but the storm probably shook it loose. Leary stepped nearer, her gaze tracing the pattern of light inside the device. On my world, she said softly. This node is often compared to a heartbeat. When its rhythm becomes uncertain, the entire system feels it. She touched her fingertips lightly to the surface of the console, almost reflective. Ethan adjusted one final wire, aligning it with careful precision. The transmitter gave a low, melodic hum, smoother than before, but still hesitant. It is not perfect, he said, but it is breathing again. Leary's eyes widened, catching the glow of the console lights. The relief that crossed her face was quiet and genuine, almost like someone experiencing sunrise after many dark nights. You fixed it, she said. I helped it, Ethan corrected. You kept it going. She held the transmitter gently, her thumb brushing its surface in a slow, thoughtful motion. I was afraid it would fail completely, she murmured. Afraid that if the signal died, the path back to my group would close. Ethan leaned back, resting his hands loosely at his sides. You are not alone now, he said. There is time, and we will figure it out. Leary lifted her gaze to him, her expression carrying a quiet trust that had not been there before. The heater clicked softly in the background, spreading a warm current through the room. Outside, the storm thinned until only the faint hiss of settling sand touched the air. Leary exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing as though she had finally stepped out of the storm completely. Thank you, she said, her voice almost a whisper but steady. For waiting. And for this. Ethan met her eyes, the corners of his mouth tipping into a small, genuine smile. Signals matter, he said again. And this time, she nodded. Morning crept in quietly, spreading a pale glow across the outpost windows as the storm finally dissolved into a calm haze. Ethan stepped over to reset the environmental controls, letting the room warm by just a couple more degrees. Leary sat near the console, holding the transmitter in her hands the way someone might hold an object they are almost afraid to trust. The soft hum inside it pulsed with a more even rhythm, casting a faint blue reflection across her silver-blue skin. She watched the light shift gently, as if its steadiness was something new. It feels different, she murmured, her fingers brushing the smooth surface. Lighter. Ethan smiled slightly. It is still fragile, but it is working. She lifted her gaze to him, studying his face with an expression that carried a thoughtful kind of calm. You said signals want to be found, she said. Does that apply to people as well? The question caught Ethan in a stillness he did not immediately break. He leaned against the metal frame of the console, crossing his arms loosely. Sometimes, he said. Sometimes people get lost too. And sometimes the right person hears them. Leary held his gaze a moment longer before looking back at the transmitter, her expression softening. She seemed to be weighing something private, something she was not sure how to place into words. The heater clicked again, spreading warmth through the small room. Ethan noticed how she leaned into it unconsciously, her posture relaxing. You should rest, he said. Your body went through a lot crossing that storm. She nodded gently, but made no move to stand. Instead, her attention drifted toward the small observation window. Outside, the desert floor shimmered gently under the first stretch of sunlight, each grain of dust catching light like scattered fragments of glass. It is beautiful, she said quietly, in a lonely way. Ethan followed her gaze. It is. This place gets overlooked because it is not dramatic. But the quiet has its own meaning. Leary's voice softened. So do the people who choose to stay in it. She hesitated, then continued. On my world, we do not often have moments like this. We are always moving, always reacting, always looking for the safest path. Silence is rare. Do you miss it? Ethan asked. Home, I mean. She took a slow breath. Yes, but not all parts of it. Some traditions make it difficult to ask for help, and even more difficult to accept it. Ethan uncrossed his arms, sensing the shift in her tone. You are safe here, he said gently. Whatever happens next, we will handle it one step at a time. Her eyes lifted to him again, and this time the trust in them was clearer, more present. She set the transmitter on the table, letting her hands rest in her lap. I would like that, she said softly. The outpost lights dimmed slightly as Ethan recalibrated the power grid, but the faint glow from the transmitter remained steady. Leary watched it with a calm that seemed to settle deeper into her with every passing minute. Ethan, she said after a quiet pause, may I ask something? Of course. She looked at him with a sincerity that made the moment feel almost fragile. Why did you wait for me? Truly. Ethan breathed in slowly, letting the silence carry his thoughts before he spoke. Because the moment I heard your voice, it felt like someone out there was trying not to disappear, he said. And I could not let that happen. Leary held his gaze, her expression open in a way it had never been before. The early light touched the side of her face, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked peaceful. The quiet inside the outpost deepened as the morning settled, turning the air warm and steady. Leary sat with her hands still resting lightly in her lap, her posture calm but thoughtful, as if Ethan's answer had opened a door she was not sure she was ready to step through. The transmitter glowed on the table beside her, its rhythm soft and reliable now, a small pulse of gentle blue that reflected against her skin. Ethan adjusted the power regulator on the wall, listening to the soft hum as the system balanced itself. When he turned back, Leary was studying him with a focus that felt different from curiosity. It held weight, like she was deciding something. "There is something you should know," she said quietly. Ethan moved closer, taking a seat across from her, careful not to break the fragile ease between them. "I am listening." Leary drew in a slow breath. "On my world, transmissions are not only signals. They are considered reflections of intent. When a signal is sent and someone answers, it forms a binding understanding. Not formal, not legal, but emotional. It means the one who answered has chosen to acknowledge the sender." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And is that important?" "Very," she replied. "It means you accepted the weight of the voice reaching out." She paused, her eyes lowering for a moment. "That is why I hesitated when I saw the outpost. I did not expect anyone to respond. It felt too hopeful." Ethan's voice softened. "Leary, I did not answer out of obligation." She looked up again, meeting his eyes with a startling earnestness. "I know that now. But among my people, when someone answers a broken signal, it says something about who they are. It says they are willing to stay when something weak or uncertain asks for help." Ethan breathed in slowly, letting her words settle. The room felt warmer, the quiet between them folding into something gentle. "I stayed," he said, "because someone out there kept trying. And that meant something to me." Leary's shoulders eased, her expression softening further. "In my culture," she continued, "we ask a question after someone answers a broken transmission. It is meant to reveal intention." Ethan nodded. "What is the question?" She hesitated, then spoke with a vulnerability he had not heard from her before. "Did you answer because you heard me? Or because you needed someone to hear you?" Ethan did not reply right away. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. He leaned back slightly, letting the question settle in the warm air. It was the kind of question that felt like a mirror. "Maybe both," he said quietly. "Maybe I heard you because I was already listening." Leary's breath caught just slightly, a tiny shift in her expression that looked like recognition. She touched the transmitter again, running her finger along the faint line of light. "That is the answer my people consider the most honest," she said, "because it admits connection instead of duty." The sun outside rose a little higher, spilling soft gold across the desert. A gentle stillness filled the outpost, carrying the calm of two people who were no longer strangers to one another. Leary's voice, when she spoke again, was barely above a whisper. "Then the bond between us is real." Ethan held her gaze, steady and warm. "It is." And for the first time, she allowed herself a small, peaceful smile. The peaceful quiet in the outpost held for a long while, soft as the morning light that filtered across the floor. Leary sat close to the console, letting her fingers rest near the transmitter as if its steady rhythm was guiding her own breathing. Ethan moved around the room with the calm precision of someone who did not want to disturb a fragile moment, checking the environmental controls, adjusting the power grid, making sure the warmth stayed even. Leary watched him with a thoughtful stillness, her silver blue eyes reflecting the soft glow of the outpost lights. When he finally settled into the seat across from her again, she exhaled gently, as though preparing herself. "There is something more," she said. "Something I did not tell you." Ethan leaned slightly forward, giving her his attention without pressure. "You can tell me anything." Leary lowered her gaze to her hands, tracing a faint line along her palm as though feeling a memory. "My group, they did not leave me behind by accident. We were traveling through this region, but my transmitter malfunctioned earlier than I realized. The storm scattered our path. When the signal broke, they would have believed I found shelter or assistance elsewhere. They do not search for broken transmissions. It is part of our way." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind her words. "So they think you are safe?" "Yes," she whispered. "But they will not return this way. Not soon." A gentle quiet settled between them. Ethan looked toward the desert stretching beyond the window. The sunlight reflected off the shifting dust like tiny floating sparks. "We will figure it out," he said softly. "We can boost the transmitter, expand the signal strength, try to reach them on a different frequency." Leary hesitated. "There is a reason I am unsure." Ethan waited, silent, steady. She lifted her eyes again, and he saw a tremor of uncertainty there, not fear, but something more complex. "If I send a strong enough signal, they will come," she said. "But once they find me, our connection," she searched for the right word, "our bond, would be considered complete. It would change the way they treat both of us. Ethan felt the weight of that settle in the space between them, the meaning of her culture's traditions weaving into every syllable. Would that be a bad thing? He asked gently. Her voice grew soft. They would expect me to leave immediately, and they would expect you to step back. A bond formed during a broken signal is considered deeply personal. It is seen as something that must be protected from outside influence. Ethan let that thought settle. So if they come, he said slowly, I lose you. Leary's breath caught, just a faint tremor, but enough to answer him before her words did. You would, she said, and I would lose this calm. She glanced at the transmitter, its glow steady and bright, before looking back at Ethan with a quiet vulnerability that felt like a confession. When the storm ended, I thought the peace I felt was from survival. But now, I think it came from being here, with you. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a deep, settling warmth. Leary, he said softly, whatever happens, we choose it together. Not out of tradition, not out of rules, but because it is ours. Her expression softened, and for a moment the outpost felt like the only place in the world. The transmitter pulsed again, gentle and steady. A heartbeat waiting for a decision. The transmitter's gentle pulse filled the room with a soft blue rhythm, steady enough that it almost felt like a second heartbeat in the outpost. Leary kept her hand close to it, but did not touch it, as though she feared even her fingers might tip the balance of the moment. Ethan stood near the observation window, watching the desert stretch into a pale horizon, the sand still carrying a faint shimmer from the passing storm. The silence between them was not empty. It was a decision waiting to take form. Leary rose slowly from her seat, her movements quiet and deliberate. She walked toward Ethan, her steps light on the metal floor. If I strengthen the signal, she said softly, they will come quickly, within hours. Ethan did not turn immediately, letting her words settle like dust in still air. When he finally looked at her, his expression held calm steadiness, but there was something thoughtful underneath. And if you do not, he asked. Leary hesitated, her eyes lowering briefly before lifting again. Then they will assume I found another path, another settlement, or that I chose not to reconnect. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding. Would they accept that? Yes, she said. It would not be questioned. Not by our customs. Her gaze drifted toward the transmitter, glowing quietly on the table. A broken signal belongs to the one who receives it. Tradition allows them to choose how to answer. Ethan's voice softened. And what do you choose? Leary inhaled, the breath unsteady but honest. I do not want to leave this calm, she admitted. Not yet. Not before I understand what it means. She stepped closer to the window, standing beside Ethan. The desert stretched outward, quiet and wide, holding the kind of stillness that allowed truths to rise gently. Ethan, she said, there is something else you should know. He turned to her fully now, sensing the weight behind her tone. Leary looked up at him, her silver blue eyes reflecting the soft morning light. In my culture, when someone answers a broken signal, the sender is expected to share something in return. Something true. Something they have never spoken aloud. Ethan's heartbeat slowed, not with fear, but with an understanding that settled deeply. What is it you have not spoken aloud? He asked quietly. Leary held his gaze, her voice gentle but steady. I was not just afraid of being lost, she said. I was afraid that even if someone found me, they would not stay. Ethan felt the words settle inside him with a quiet resonance. He stepped slightly closer, not touching her, but letting the closeness speak for him. I stayed, he said softly. Leary's breath trembled just slightly, and she nodded. Yes, she whispered. You stayed. The transmitter hummed behind them, steady and bright, as if waiting for a choice. Leary looked back at it, then at Ethan again. If I send the signal now, everything changes, she said. If I do not send it, everything also changes. Ethan's voice remained calm, gentle, grounded. Then choose the path that feels like truth, not tradition. Leary stepped toward the console, her hand hovering above the activation switch. The glow of the transmitter painted her skin in soft shades of blue and silver. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. Then I choose the path that lets me stay a little longer. She lowered her hand, not pressing the switch, and the transmitter continued its gentle rhythm, carrying a calm that felt entirely new. The transmitter's soft pulse glowed in the center of the room, steady now, no longer a cry for help, but a quiet reminder of a choice that had already been made. Leary stood beside it, her hand hovering just above the surface, not touching, simply feeling the warmth rise from the device. Ethan watched her from a few steps away, leaning lightly against the console. The morning light poured through the observation window in long golden lines, stretching across the floor and touching her feet first, then climbing slowly toward her hands. She lifted her gaze toward the desert outside, the calm horizon stretching endlessly. There was no storm left, only sunlight and the faint shimmer of settling dust. "It feels different now," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Because the choice was yours." She turned toward him, her expression thoughtful and warm. "My people say that calm is not the absence of storms," she murmured. "It is the moment you decide which direction you want to walk after they pass." Ethan smiled gently. "Then where do you want to walk?" Leary stepped closer, not reaching out, not breaking the stillness, simply moving to stand beside him at the window. Their reflections blended faintly in the glass, the colors of their skin carrying the early light in completely different ways but settling together seamlessly. "I want to understand this feeling," she said. "This sense that I am allowed to stay. Allowed to breathe without rushing to the next place." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "You are allowed," he said. "You always were." A subtle tremor of emotion crossed her face, something tender and unguarded. "On my world, we rarely hear those words. Everything has purpose, duty, expectation." She paused, her voice becoming a quiet confession. "But you gave me a choice without asking for anything in return." Ethan looked at her gently. "Maybe that is what calm really is. No demands, just presence." Leary's eyes softened, and she let out a slow breath that sounded almost like relief. "Ethan," she said, "there is one more part of our tradition. When a broken signal forms a bond, the sender offers a truth, and the receiver," she hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "The receiver offers a promise." Ethan straightened slightly, sensing the weight of her words. "What kind of promise?" Leary lifted her gaze fully to his, and the quiet in her eyes was deeper than the outpost's stillness, deeper than the desert's horizon. "A promise that they will not let the other fade back into silence," she said. The room felt smaller then, not confined but intimate, warm. Ethan stepped close enough that he could see the faint shimmer along her skin where the sunlight touched it. "Then here is my promise," he said, voice steady and low. "You will not fade. Not here. Not while I am listening." Leary closed her eyes briefly, as if letting the words settle somewhere deep inside her. When she opened them again, they held a quiet brightness, a soft peace that had not been there before. She moved her hand toward the transmitter and switched it to a low, dormant mode. The glow dimmed, but the room did not feel dimmer. It felt calmer. "Then," she whispered, "I will stay." Ethan looked at her, the sunlight touching the space between them, and for a long, gentle moment, neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The calm they shared was its own language, soft as the desert morning, steady as a heartbeat no longer broken.